right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another amazing episode of the Meraki Unboxed podcast. Once again, I am one of your hosts, Tanner Yehlik, and we are here with a pretty special extra learning episode. Today we are learning about learning, or more specifically, the Learning Hub with Meraki, a wonderful resource you have to go and learn about Meraki, how to use it, and everything about it. And today, I am joined with our guest, Philip Coburn, a senior technical trainer at Meraki. Philip, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm fantastic, Tanner. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's good to have you here. And before we get too started, I do just have to make a note. Unfortunately, this will be our last episode of 2023. However, we'll be back in the new year. So you can expect the next episode to be coming in January. And then from there, we're going to have episodes posted about every 3 weeks instead of every two. But back to the topic at hand, the Learning Hub. And Phil, what? Tell us a little bit about your role with the Learning Hub and here at Meraki.
Hey, thanks so much, Tanner. I'm happy to do so. Just once again, my name is Phil, and I'm what we call a technical evangelist, or at least that's one of the job titles that we've had for this role. Whatever we wind up calling ourselves, technical evangelists, technical trainers, what have you, we all do the same thing. We all get people excited about the Meraki platform, and we understand the ones and zeros that go on behind the scenes. And so our role is to get people a little bit more knowledgeable about what we do and everything Meraki. And I was able to do that pretty effectively as, just like you, Tanner, I was actually in the Meraki support department
Mm-hmm.
for quite a while. And as you remember, learn a lot, see a lot, and do a lot, and hopefully take that knowledge back to the current roles that both you and I have. And for myself, as a trainer, it was really a good thing for me to be able to go through all of those different trouble calls, being able to help a variety of different customers, be exposed to a ton of different technologies, and be able to learn from it. I was able to do everything from troubleshooting password resets to layer 3 PIM multicast. And so I felt that I got a really solid understanding of the entire Meraki platform. And the more I learned, the more I liked it. And that applied
Mm-hmm.
to every product, all the way from the MX, which I know is near and dear to your heart, to something like Systems Manager, or even our, Meraki Vision cameras. So uh, it,
Mm-hmm.
the the foundation was laid for a while ago. Where the Learning Hub comes in is the kind of like the pathway towards learning for our external audiences. And I do have a role in the Learning Hub to a pretty high degree, in that I'm an instructor. I perform instructor-led training, and so our participants who wind up taking ILT go through people like me, and they're able to find a lot of those offerings through the Learning Hub. So to clarify for everyone, the Learning Hub is kind of a nexus for finding what training works for you. And one of the reasons I am so happy to be on the show today is to help people understand that kind of journey and how to find something that works for them.
Everyone needs to find something that works for them. I know that in support, one of the things that I had to learn, not only the Meraki product suite, and all of the products that we had and everything about them, but also learning how to learn. So hopefully the Learning Hub is a great resource for people to learn how they learn, as well as the Meraki suite. And fun fact, when I was a wee lad in Meraki within my first year, I actually interviewed for Phil's team. I was within my first year, very inexperienced. Don't think I did very well on that interview, but it was a great experience. I got to know Phil very well. Phil has taught me a lot. And so, once again, I'm also very excited to have you here and talk with you again. But so, Phil, how was the up to this point? How have the trainings been? Because I understand there's been some changes. There's been some train changes to the trainings that you guys offer.
There has, yeah, and these are evolutions that have been in place even before I was on the team. Like I've been with Meraki for I can't do math, but since 2017 now. It was August 2017 when I joined Meraki support, and even then, there were still changes and improvements being made to the learning offerings, which at the time were mostly focused on some very solid ILT offerings like CM&A and ECMS. And I think a lot of our listeners may remember some of those terms, or maybe even be familiar with something like CM&O. And I'm not going to give an entire history lesson of the evolution of everything that we've done, but I can tell you that uh, before the pandemic, we were mostly focused on delivering excellent ILT training and supporting that journey through our entire department with product enablement. So the whole point of product enablement is to make sure that those who are interested in Meraki have the right resources to be successful. And that goes into a lot of different things, like, of course, what I do, instructor-led training, and advocating for our own community members on the Meraki community, as well as providing some learning pathways to them. And so before the pandemic, things were a bit different because people were super excited to be able to learn directly from a real person right in front of them. And we would fly out to customer sites or other Cisco sites and perform this training for some of our pre-sales training like CM&A, and then our more technical training like ECMS2. And that was working for a long time. And then the pandemic came and everything wound up changing. And so we had to ask
A
ourselves,
lot of things did change.
yeah, that's a truism if I've ever heard it, right? So we had to think about like we still have learners. We still have learners who have learning needs. And now the playing field is completely different. How do we go ahead and help people learn in a completely different manner than we thought that we would have to pivot to? And obviously, this is a challenge for any other company out there. But for us, for Meraki, we were uniquely positioned in that, of course, Meraki being cloud managed, remotely managed, we figured we can also go ahead and perform remote training. And that was pretty effective. We were able to perform the same training with a few adjustments here and there to meet our learners' needs. And I don't know, Tanner, if you remember, but during the beginning throes of the pandemic, there were a lot of people who were absolutely excited to learn more about Meraki for that very reason. We had, I guess, a good example is like customers who were learning about something like, say, our switches. Our switches are amazing devices, and we can't be more proud of them.
They are.
One of the biggest selling points for our switches is their remote nature. And so you had some, engineers in wherever they were trying to troubleshoot, say, something like a broken Ethernet cable, and they can't get on site. What do? And with other vendors, I think that it might be a little bit difficult for them to actually perform any form of troubleshooting, layer 1 all the way to something like layer 8, trying to figure out what the user is actually saying. But with Meraki switches, it's easier because you can press a button and you can perform something like a cable test, right? And our customers kind of caught on to this. They're saying, hey, Meraki switches, or any other one of our product lines, are something that can really help me out in something like this kind of situation. And so there was like a big influx of interest for learning offerings. They wanted to come to us. They said, how can we learn more about Meraki? And that's kind of the catalyst, no pun intended, of course, because we're Meraki now. It's kind of the catalyst of how we approach the idea of changing and evolving our learning offerings. So, like I was saying, and to kind of summarize here, things have changed over the years. We did perform in-person training. Now we've virtualized the in-person training. And this is one of the best parts that maybe a lot of people don't know about. Now we're offering a full suite of e-learning offerings as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, got to change with the times. And for those that don't know, layer 8 is human factors when it comes to troubleshooting a network. So the layers 1 through 7, OSI model. Look it up if you don't know it. But yes, have to change with the times. Bringing about those e-learnings. Happy to see it available. And Phil, where can people find those e-learnings? Where are those?
Those are hosted on Learning Hub. And so if one were to go to cs.co/learn, that's our shortened URL for Learning Hub. And the Learning Hub is hosted on the Meraki community. Now, for those who don't know, the Meraki community is kind of like a forum for everyone to, and this is not just Meraki employees or Cisco employees or partners or whatever, but literally everyone to be able to understand what the latest and greatest about Meraki is. It's also a first step towards troubleshooting without engaging with support. Maybe a first um, good step before taking any sort of like before submitting a case or something like that. And since it is a community, it's a place to better understand other people who are interested in Meraki. And it's
You can learn so much from a community of people.
absolutely, and it's not just, random people on the internet who are looking to I don't know, solve a problem and move on. But we have a dedicated group of individuals who come back, you know, day after day, hour after hour, who are absolutely into it. Big Meraki fans that don't get paid for any of that stuff, but are there to just simply help people and answer questions. So I would consider some of our most top contributors on the community extremely valuable assets. And again, they don't have to do it. They just do it because they love Meraki. And that's such a really cool thing. And so that's one of the reasons we host the Learning Hub on the community, is because we want to make sure that it is successful, it's accessible, and it is able to be part of that larger enablement story. My department actually is in charge of the community and therefore the Learning Hub as well.
Fantastic. And so, how, what in other ways has the design of the Learning Hub changed? And how is that really enhancing their experience?
And this is something that is also an evolution of not just what we experienced over the pandemic, but just industry changing to adapt to learner needs as well. And the the evolution has been kind of interesting over the years. And again, like to summarize, we had a bunch of fantastic ILT offerings. Now we have e-learning, and so we have all these different options for people. And we had to figure out, okay, well, how do we simplify this? We say make it Meraki simple or whatever, right? Like we want to make sure that we are
Simplify everything.
simplify everything, exactly right. And that messaging is similar and consistent with what we do in our department as well. And when you're talking about something like the UI, you're talking about how to best meet learner needs. And if you were to take a look at an entire catalog of all of our training offerings, one might even be overwhelmed and not know where to start. And I don't blame you for that. Like when I got to Meraki support, uh, just like you, Tanner, I was put through a series of trainings, internal trainings, to make sure that I was fully knowledgeable on all Meraki products and features. We are full stack engineers and support, and we're proud of that. But it's a lot of work to get there. And that's one of the reasons that support is so well regarded in the networking world. And
Backbone.
exactly right. Yeah. But we don't get there it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It has a bunch of different people involved to make sure that the learner needs for network support engineers like ourselves are met. And so doing something like putting someone on the phones ready to answer advanced questions about OSPF v2 or BGP in your first week is not going to be something that's going to be really effective. We have to make sure that there's a pathway to learning. You start in where you're able to make a big impact at first, and then be able to evolve that learning in to better help our customers who need that kind of advanced support. So clear beginning and a clear end. And that's kind of where we're leaning towards with the Learning Hub as well. We don't want to have learners jump into our entire catalog and be confused or wonder where to start
Yeah.
or be overwhelmed, right? And
There is
even
a
though
lot there.
there is a lot there, and there's a lot there with Meraki. And although our messaging with Meraki is, traditionally been things like keep things Meraki simple and stuff like that, but honestly, we have a ton of different products these days, so many features, and although I think that we still make a really big push to help people easily understand how to use things, we're not sacrificing features. What you can do with Meraki is uh, is just as good, if not better, than other vendors out
Mhm.
there. Uh, so our big focus, of course, these days is more on like usability. But how do you help kind of shepherd people's learning needs and make sure that their needs are met? In fact, sometimes they may not even know what their needs are in the first place. And so
Yep.
that's leaning into the idea of the Learning Hub and the evolution of its design. Because, like I said, we can't just have like a catalog of things. We have to make sure that, depending on who you are and what you need, we have offerings available to you. And the Learning Hub is designed to show offerings that are relevant and contextual to who you are. So a partner or a Cisco employee is going to see slightly different offerings than you might see if you were a customer. And that's not any sort of criticism. It
Mhm.
just means that we have the right trainings available to you without you having to sift through or kind of like separate the wheat from the chaff, as it were. And so it's kind of like a guided experience, if you will, even if you don't know what's happening. And so when a customer would log into the Learning Hub, they'd be able to see our technical training offerings. And that is a design choice. We want to make sure that the things that a customer and engineer would need to be successful is right there in front of them.
Mhm.
So you would have things like our introduction to Meraki training, kind of like an overview of the platform. You would have other e-learning options like basic wireless, advanced wireless, and like the MX security appliance, even something as advanced as Cisco Plus Secure Connect. And the list goes on. We're
Mhm.
constantly adding different courses, e-learning courses um, to the entire list of things that we offer. And of course, we also have a full suite of ILT offerings, which again are a bit different because those can be both for pre-sales as well as technical training. Again, what you see depends on who you are. So I'd encourage everyone to do is simply just log on to the Learning Hub and find something that works for them. But this is
Yeah.
again still an evolution. We want to make sure that what offerings we have in the first place are still contextual and relevant. And
That's
go ahead.
it's good that you're catering it to the person that is doing the learning. So like it's so now just to make sure that I understand and so that the listeners understand, not only is the Learning Hub offering opportunities to learn the basics of dashboard and the basics of each product, but it also goes into more detail on some of the more complex things that our products can do because you can only simplify things so much. You can get to a point where, oh, now I got to configure BGP. Now I need to know how BGP works. And does the Learning Hub go into detail about how to do something like BGP?
it's a it will kind of shunt you towards that automatically, and it's also a as it is a portal. It's designed to get you knowledgeable about not just things like BGP, but like what learning pathways you want to take. And this is something that we're actually working towards right now, is making sure that we have actually dedicated learning pathways for people to follow. And like I was mentioning before, being exposed to a certain product or a certain part of knowledge is not enough anymore. We want to make sure that the concepts that people are interested in are also uh, are also something that we can educate on. And what I mean by concepts is not just the MX or the MS or the MR, but rather things
Mhm.
like SD-WAN or network security or IoT. And it's important for us to shift towards those kinds of concepts because a learner, depending on who they are, may not really understand the value of all of those concepts in and of themselves. They may be able to see things like, okay, this is an MX. Great. What does that mean to me? And we would say
Mhm.
something to the effect of, well, the MX, it does a number of things. It's able to route traffic. It does firewalling, secure SD-WAN, and auto VPN. And then they would further ask questions. So it's like, okay, so I can get my traffic point A to point B automatically. Is that something similar? And so, as you know, Tanner, working with the MX, it's not
Yeah.
just the ones and zeros that go on behind the scenes. It's really what it means to the user, how you can use an MX to empower and simplify their approach to solving their own problems, right? And for us, it means the same thing. Like we have to make sure that the concepts that people are interested in, the solutions that we provide, have matching training offerings. And this is one of the things that we're evolving with pretty lately is being able to have these kinds of learning pathways that demonstrate more solutions-based training rather than just product-based training. Although both, of course, are important, again, depending on where you are in your learner journey. And so when you ask about things like, okay, can I find
Mhm.
BGP? Yes, the answer is yes. But we would encourage people to check out the Learning Hub so they can see the offerings for themselves and then make a
Absolutely.
choice or work with their sales rep to make a choice to see what's best for them. Maybe e-learning is something that is up their alley. Maybe they need to have an introduction to Meraki routing and switching before they move on to those more advanced concepts. Or maybe it's best for them to jump into something like instructor-led training, where we can give a little more bespoke and custom exposure to those technologies and those solutions.
Fantastic. And so you mentioned a couple things that people can use the Learning Hub to learn about, but can you list out a couple more of the products and services that the listeners can use or use the Learning Hub to learn more about?
Oh, sure. Well, as it stands, we have training offerings for e-learning on just about all of our products. So you'd be able to see things. I don't even have the page up, but I can think about, see it in my mind's eye. But we have uh, 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 all platforms, wireless, switches, MX security appliance. We have Cisco plus Secure Connect, and um, working on some camera things for sure. Uh, we also have Systems Manager, which is extremely important for those who have used that product, as it's good to get your bearings when you're using SM. Every product that we have, we feature in some way. And the e-learning options that we don't have, or products that we don't have e-learning options for yet, we have instructor-led training on. So if you're looking to learn more about how to use Meraki, that is the place to do it for sure.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned a couple learning paths, and I remember them from when I was learning about your team. There was ECMS1 and
Mhm.
ECMS2. Are those still the same, or these have expanded, or is it still those are the two learning paths available?
Yeah, so let me go ahead and clarify. Yeah, ECMS stands for Engineering Cisco Meraki Solutions, and it's an evolution, or at least ECMS1 is an evolution from something we used to call CMNO. I think it stood for Certified Meraki Network Operator. We wound up rebranding CMNO to ECMS as we released the Cisco Meraki Solutions Specialist or CMSS exam. My former colleague Rune gave a wonderful podcast, number 69, I believe, about his own learner journey and that exam. And that exam is something that we still offer today. It is Meraki's uh, operator not course, but it's an operator exam, meaning that if you took the exam and you passed it, you'd be considered to be a qualified Meraki operator. It's a Cisco cert, specialist certification level, similar to something like I think DevNet or maybe CSM, think. And ECMS 1 and 2 were designed to get people technically prepared to ultimately take and pass that certification. And so, although we always had technical training in the form of things like CMNO, again, it wound up evolving into ECMS to kind of serve as like a learning pathway towards that exam. And once upon a time, ECMS 1 was actually only instructor-led training, but we also offer some e-learning versions of that as well now, which is, again, something that people can check out on the Learning Hub and see what works for you. If instructor-led training is an option, that's great. If you want kind of the convenience of doing things online, that's fine too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the more we can adapt to learner needs, the better. And in that training, again, we're going to be, as it's operator training, we go over all products and major features, just to make sure that if a user were to use Meraki, after that training, they know how. And it's really cool and very heartening to see, as I've noticed some, some of our large spend customers have actually not only advocated for their own techs to start using and going through ECMS 1, but actually mandating it. And
That's
so
awesome.
it's fantastic, yeah. And it warms my heart because it means that, what I do matters. And it means that learning that these engineers are getting, these operators, also matter and make a difference. And so some of these larger customers, ISPs and MSPs, they may have hundreds, maybe even thousands of engineers who are learning about Meraki to provide their own services to their own customers, will mandate that even before they start touching their own networks, they
Mhm.
go through ECMS training. And as I think any ISP or MSP who is offering some sort of service will wind up using Meraki in its own way, of course, because we have such a wide variety of products that we sell now. But ECMS covers all of that stuff, so they can learn what they need to be successful in their own endeavors, and then therefore pass it on to their own customers. And it's really nice to see because, again, it's uh, one of the best one-stop shops for for learning in an operator's manner.
Awesome. And for just in case some listeners don't know, ISP, internet service provider, and MSP is a managed service provider.
Mhm.
Um, Larger companies that we work with quite a bit. Um, but so how does the training that's available on the Learning Hub compare to the training that support gets when they would first join, as well as their continued learning?
Yeah, that's
And, could it get someone to the level that support is at?
mm, that's a great question, and I I actually have given ECMS training to some network support engineers, some individuals who are particularly interested in, you know, boosting their skills, or even as a refresher. Like, as a network support engineer, you're exposed to all sorts of types of troubleshooting that you never thought that you would probably run into. And there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm
Indeed.
sure that you and I could probably talk for hours on the stories that we've come across. Um, but ECMS and the training that we have on the Learning Hub is mostly directed towards external audiences. And we have a distinction between, who needs that external training and then who needs internal training. And we actually do have a fantastic department internally who trains network support engineers on what they need to know to be successful. And that would involve things like not just understanding how Meraki handles routing and switching, but also things like case management and how to work with customers, and how to um, you know understand how all of our products work together in the context of what we do in Meraki support. So it's not so much an augmentation of what you would find in Meraki support zone training, but again, for external audiences, people who either are absolutely new to Meraki and want to start using them from an operator's perspective, or maybe have done that for a while and would like to learn a little bit more about the advanced features and services that are either present or coming down the pike as well. So that's why I mentioned things like Cisco Plus Secure Connect, is
Mhm.
because that is something that historically hasn't really been tied into Meraki, but is now, and
Still pretty new.
it's still pretty new, yeah. And we need to have the type of training, the kind of infrastructure, not just internally for Meraki NSCs, but also for anyone who is going to be using that product. And that's a wonderful segue into talking about the more importance of Meraki in general in the eyes of Cisco. So in at Cisco Live this last June, we announced some different visual styles of the dashboard, and you probably see them yourself, Tanner. But
Hmm.
this is a wonderful evolution of how the dashboard has looked in the past. And it's not to say that anything was wrong with the dashboard before, but we're always upgrading the dashboard to meet.
Yeah, you got to make improvements.
You got to make improvements, exactly. And the one of those improvements is the ability to, if I recall correctly, switch between different UIs or different Cisco product dashboards, like I think Umbrella or App Dynamics and things like that,
Hmm.
in the same UI. And if people are doing that, if people are effectively switching between things like Meraki and other Cisco BUs in the same pane of glass, then they're going to be more interested in how Meraki is going to be integrated into this. And I won't necessarily guess how Meraki is going to be, seen in something like 5 or 10 years down the road. Exactly, it's not something I can speak on, but I can say that Meraki and the concept of the dashboard and cloud management and what we do is becoming more and more important to the overall Cisco fabric. And I think a lot of our learners are kind of catching on to that and starting to see that, hey, this whole Meraki thing is not just for mom and pop coffee shops, but is things that
Hmm.
you can really start and continue to deploy at the enterprise level. And I want to know more about it, and I don't know enough right now.
Absolutely. And so now let's bring it down to the people that don't necessarily already work with Meraki. So let's say that someone wanted to um, just improve their knowledge. Like, let's say someone out of college wants
Mhm.
to improve their resume and look good. So obviously, there are some companies, like you said, that are now requiring their employees to take this training. Do you think this would be a good resource for someone to take this training and or go to the Learning Hub, do the trainings, put that on their resume, and maybe they could come work at Meraki?
Yeah, absolutely. This is good for everyone who has either a learner need or is simply just curious. Because again, when you log into the Learning Hub, it's going to be reflective of who you are and what you need. And so if you're looking to increase basic knowledge, this is a wonderful first step.
Hmm.
And those e-learning courses are also free. It's important to note, like there's not a lot of gating behind that basic training. And so if I were to go back in time and absolutely change the course of my own personal history and start studying networking when I was 21 or something like that, which is very different from my how my life actually unfolded. This would be great. Absolutely, I think that I would be very happy in not only the training offerings, but getting excited about how the Meraki story, right? And when you are looking to uh, use something, either operationally or more esoterically, it's important to understand the why behind things. Tanner, you probably read what is it, Simon Sinek's Start with Why, or whatever that book is. Do you know that book?
I know of it. I have not gotten a chance to read it yet.
Yeah, it's actually pretty fascinating and an easy read as well. And the whole premise is there's a difference between why companies do things, how they're done, and what exactly that goes into it. And what I like about Meraki, and I think I would have had I started my you know network engineering journey at a younger age, is the why, why Meraki does things. And this leads into some of the things that I talk about in my own instructor-led trainings, is that, Meraki does just sell products to, make money. We want to make a specific impact in an industry that needs transformation. And that actually is the whole story of Meraki, being able to take what is inherently complex and kind of bring it down to earth for everyone. And I'd like to think that our approach to the Learning Hub is a little bit similar to that, and taking some of the same whys, the same values that Meraki has, where you have an incredibly complex ecosystem of training out there, not just with Meraki, but like any vendor, right? And how do you go about learning what is important to you? And the why for us at working with the Learning Hub and making sure people understand it is we want to help people along their journey to better learn. And ultimately that comes back to us at Meraki and my department in a good way. And so, yeah, absolutely. This is good for just about anyone who is interested in learning about Meraki and in any facet. And you know what? The more you know and the more you start learning, the more you get excited about things, and that excitement, that advocacy winds up kind of demonstrating itself in other good ways. And so you might want to, after visiting the Learning Hub, explore other parts of the community. Maybe start talking to people who are big Meraki advocates, or maybe starting to learn a little bit more about the products themselves. And this is something that I advocate for in any of my trainings, because we have a lot of resources, not just the Learning Hub, but things like Meraki documentation. And the more you understand and use those resources, the more successful you're going to be. So say you're starting with talking about the MX, and you start to learn about it, you understand its main features: routing, firewalling, auto VPN, SD-WAN, other things. And then you start taking some of our training offerings, you start learning, and you're like, hey, that's kind of cool. I didn't know that the MX actually integrated with Systems Manager. I don't even know what Systems Manager is. Maybe I'll go ahead and check it out. You start learning about some of our other features, like, oh, that's kind of cool. With Systems Manager's Sentry policies, you can push out group policy from the MX dynamically to any endpoint that's enrolled from there. Kind of putting the onus or the focus on the endpoint to be consistent with your own security policies. And that's actually a pretty advanced use case for both the MX and Systems Manager. And it's something
Very
that
much so.
you probably wouldn't have understood unless you were exposed to it somehow. And speaking towards maybe like a younger engineer who's just getting started, taking that knowledge back to their own company and saying, hey, this is something that we can do to maybe make an impact and solve a business problem, is the exact type of thing that we want to be able to advocate for the Learning Hub.
Fantastic. That's awesome that people can, take this training and bring it back to their company. We hope that they do.
Yeah.
But so, Phil, thank you very much for joining us today. Unfortunately, that's going to bring us to the end of our, fun fact, I forgot to say this at the beginning, the at-home episode. I'm at home this time instead of being in the office. So that's just one of the changes that came about from COVID, is being able to work from home and, like you said, do the learnings from your computer, do the e-learnings. But listeners, if you want to learn more about the Meraki Learning Hub and furthermore Meraki, go to cs.co/learn, where you can check out the offerings and enroll in something that works for you. And hopefully you come back to it often. Always keep learning. So, Phil, once again, thank you very much for joining me today. I very much enjoyed our conversation. Can't wait for this to get posted. And I hope that you have a good weekend. And listeners, thank you again for listening. And we'll see you in the next one.